Hi, and welcome to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. I'm Dupe Witherick, alcohol free wellbeing and transformational coach, and the best selling author of A Cocktail of Clarity, How to Ditch Drinking, Embody a Joyful New Identity, and Thrive Alcohol Free. This podcast will show you that being alcohol free is not what the traditional narrative says. And even though alcohol is so ingrained in our society that it is okay to give yourself permission to stop drinking if you want to. And you do not have to wait until you hit rock bottom. It is certainly not boring, and I believe ditching drinking is just the start to living an extraordinary life. By getting rid of this one thing, it allows the doors to open to endless possibilities and opportunities. Each week, we will have guests on who are at various stages of the alcohol-free journey, from those who are curious to those who have been alcohol-free for years. We will also have experts on talking about different topics relating to alcohol and beyond. Through these conversations, you will discover what it means to thrive alcohol-free. Enjoy. Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. I'm so pleased that you're here and you're listening. I hope you've had the most wonderful week and you're doing well. So, if you have been doing the Alcohol Free August Challenge, which is what I've been doing all month, giving away tips and tricks for you to be alcohol free for the month of August. We are already 21 days in, which is amazing. So 3 weeks alcohol free if you have started at the beginning of August, and you should be really proud of yourself because that is no mean feat. And I absolutely know it's not easy, and definitely the first couple of weeks are quite tricky. And the fact that you are 21 days in is fantastic. So well done, you. I think that's brilliant. As always, as I've been doing for the past 2 weeks, I will just give a recap. If you haven't been doing the Alcohol Free August Challenge, but you want to take a break, it's never too late to join. So you can still do the last 10 days with me, and I go live on Instagram at Thrive Alcohol Free every day, and the recordings go on to TikTok and YouTube as well. So whatever your preferred platform, you can get the videos there. And I've been going live with a different tip each day. So I thought, why not recap the last 7 days, as I've done that each week since we started. So on day 15, I talked about sugar and the fact that you may have stopped drinking alcohol and found that you're suddenly craving sugar, and that's completely normal. So that was day 15. Go ahead and listen to that video and you'll find out why. And then we went to day 16 and talked about sleep and the fact that sleep can be all over the place. But the likelihood is at day 21 now, you should be waking up, even if you're not having the best night's sleep or it's a bit mixed, you should probably be waking up feeling quite rested, feeling like you've got a bit more energy, feeling just a bit more awake. Definitely not as foggy headed as you may have been feeling prior to stopping drinking. But again, sleep is a mixed bag, but it's a journey and it's a process. And trust me, it gets to the point where your sleep is just amazing all the time. So hang in there. And then day 17, we talked about movement and how important it is to build in healthy habits to replace the drinking. And moving really gives you those natural highs in terms of dopamine, serotonin, endorphins. And I suggest that you do some sort of exercise, whatever that is. It can be walking the dog, which you might know I love doing. We've got a 7-year-old black Labrador called Bentley, and I love walking and running with him. But movement is key. So try and do 20 to 30 minutes a day. Getting out in nature as well just helps so much. And we talk about that as well. So that's day 17. Day 18, we talked about quit lit books. You will have seen on the podcast, I've had quite a few authors. So go and check out their books. I've also got a few authors that will be coming up as well in the coming months. And so quit lit books about stopping drinking, are really helpful just to get different perspectives and hear people's stories and to realize you're not alone. So if you haven't tried a quick look book yet, then why not grab chapter one of A Cocktail of Clarity. I have it in a few formats, so you can head to Instagram and get any format you want, but I will put the link to the chapter one video so that you can go and grab that as a bit of a taster. And chapter one of A Cocktail of Clarity, which is my book, and it actually won an award last September, so that was really exciting. But it's called A Cocktail of Clarity: How to Ditch Drinking, Embody a Joyful New Identity, and Thrive Alcohol Free. And so chapter one actually has a lot more than chapter one. So I'll include it for you. It's got why I wrote the book, why you should read the book, my story, and then it goes into chapter one, which is all about are you being served? Which is really, is alcohol still serving you? So feel free to go and grab that. That was Quit Lit on day 18. Then day 19, it was Monday. So I talked about being kind, and this journey is not easy, and a lot of us say we'll stop drinking and then we won't, or we try to moderate and we then berate ourselves for not actually sticking to our plans. We decide on that we're not going to drink Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but then something happens at work and we end up pouring that large glass of wine on Tuesday evening and then feeling really bad the next day. I just want you to be kind to yourself. This isn't an easy process. The fact that you're thinking about it, the fact that you're trying to do something different, which is very against social norms and not really what most people are doing, the fact that you're actually in listening to this podcast, you're way ahead of a lot of people. If you think that not drinking can help you in some way, be that spiritually, emotionally, physically, or mentally, then taking a break is probably helpful for you and it's something that you may want to do, but it's a process. And so if you do have a drink, when you say you're not going to drink, just think about what what was the reason I had the drink? What, how did I feel afterwards? And what will I want to do differently next time? But most importantly, be kind. Then day 20 was all about nature and getting out in nature and enjoying nature and observing nature. And I love clouds, which sounds very odd. I love clouds. I love stars. And so just looking up and taking that all in and walking through, we're really lucky where we live in the Chiltern Hills. So we have beautiful countryside around us. We occasionally spot deer, we have rabbits and butterflies and all the rest. So I was just encouraging you on day 20 to really go for walks in nature, which links to the movement part. But obviously, movement can be lots of different things. But just be present and take it in because that's what it's all about. And then day 21, you'll see that there is a theme this week. So day 21 was all about noticing. What did you notice today? What is it that what do you maybe not see? Are you really being present with when your husband talks or when your child speaks to you? Are you really taking in things around you? Have you noticed what's changed in the past 21 days? You might have noticed that your taste buds have changed. You might have found that actually things that you thought you enjoyed eating, you don't actually enjoy eating, and actually other things just taste amazing and food tastes amazing because you suddenly have the taste buds back again. They're not being numbed by alcohol. You might have also noticed that your sleep is better and that you're waking up a bit more rejuvenated. And then you might have noticed, which I just loved when I first stopped drinking, that real authentic sense of laughter and humor and laughing until you cry, and just that genuine sense of joy, which I think you lose. I always talk about how with emotions, we tend to be trying to create a feeling or escape from a feeling when we're drinking. And generally, a lot of people are trying to numb out those negative emotions, those emotions they don't want to sit with. But we're also numbing out the positive emotions. We're numbing out the happiness, the joy, the gratitude, the positivity. We're numbing all of those out as well. And so you may have found in the past few weeks, you might have heard a child laugh or you might have seen something that was genuinely, really authentically funny to you, and you have just laughed your head off, and you're really enjoying that. So day 21 was all about noticing as well. So I hope that's helpful. Hopefully there's some good tips in terms of how to potentially reduce what you're drinking, or to take a break and do something different, and have some tools in your toolkit that will help you along the way. And then my week's been lots of fun, and I've had some really good sessions and recorded some podcast episodes. And we went to see Taylor Swift at the Eras Tour. I took my 10-year-old daughter as a last minute, it was a last minute thing, and she was over the moon, completely surprised. Her face was an absolute picture, but we managed to go and see her on Friday night, and it was the best evening, and really special actually being able to take our 10-year-old daughter with us to see Taylor Swift, who is her favorite artist at the moment, because of course she's a Swiftie, and just how kind and generous people were. We, as I said, it was quite last minute, so we just jumped on the train to head into Wembley, and I realised we hadn't really made an effort, we hadn't really dressed up or put sparkles on or anything else, but the people opposite us, another mum and daughter who were sat on the train with us, they had loads of the daughter had lots of bracelets, and then said to us, "Are you going to the Taylor Swift concert?" to my daughter, and she then gave her a bracelet, and then people next to us gave her a bracelet, so she came away with like 8 or 9 different friendship bracelets, which just goes to show, people are really kind, and everyone wants to be generous, which is really lovely. So amazing experience. Taylor Swift was fantastic, and to be in the crowd of 92,000 people, I won't forget the experience doing that with my daughter. And one thing I wanted to highlight was dancing. Oh my goodness, we sang and we danced the night away. So if you are nervous or worried that when you don't drink, or if you decide to take a break, or if you're not drinking in this alcohol-free August, will I ever dance? Absolutely, we had the best time, and we were shaking it off. So anyway, that was my week, and yeah, it was really good. So if you are wanting to take a break, if you are at that point where you're a bit curious about becoming alcohol free but maybe don't know what to do next, book a ditch drinking discovery call, and we'll have a chat. And I'd love to chat to you and see where you are and give you some tips. And it's a very supportive, non-judgmental environment. It would just be the two of us, very private, confidential, and we will have a chat, and I will help you with potential next steps. So feel free to book a discovery call, a ditch drinking discovery call. I'll put that in the show notes as well. Okay, so today's guest is Emma Redman, and I've known Emma for many years now, and I'm delighted that she's a guest on the show. Emma's a qualified counsellor and a coach and a mum of 3. She's also a farmer, and she has ADHD. And so her relationship with alcohol is mixed. She grew up in a household where a glass of something with dinner was normal, but being drunk wasn't. But her husband is 10 years on recovery. So, and she also lost her brother-in-law to addiction in 2022. So she's always had the most respect for those battling with addiction, as well as the family and friends living with someone who might be struggling. And that's part of the reason that she became a counsellor. So Emma and I have a really good discussion about ADHD, about the impact of alcohol on that. We also just have a bit of a chat. And so without further ado, here is the episode with Emma. Hi, so welcome, Emma. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. How are you today?
I'm very well, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really honoured to be here.
Oh, bless you. It's lovely to have you on. And I've mentioned that this is a slightly different conversation to one that I've maybe had before, we've maybe had on the podcast. I'm really excited about where it's going to go. And so maybe before we start, why don't you introduce yourself so that people who might not know you can get to know a bit about you?
Absolutely. Well, my name's Emma. You probably are already aware of that. And I am a qualified counsellor and a coach. And my areas of specialism, I would say, are around ADHD management and psychoeducation, the whys, why do we do what we do? Why do I behave the way that I do? The kind of habit forming elements of our being. And I've got a particular interest in the correlations with addiction and impulse control. So yeah, that in a nutshell, that is me.
Fascinating. Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay. So I'm just thinking, where do we start? It feels like so many women that I'm coming across from client perspective or just having conversations are being diagnosed with ADHD in later life. And when I say later life, in their 30s and 40s, 50s. What are your thoughts on that? And maybe we start there in terms of your knowledge and what the reason is, and we can go from there. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I am one of that statistic. I was diagnosed at the age of, oh gosh, 35, I think it was, with ADHD. And I think it's probably a rather classic way that many women probably can resonate with, completing paperwork for my younger people and ticking the boxes and going, oh my goodness, I can relate to that. And that's me as well. That's me. And whilst doing that, I was also really struggling with my qualification as well and understanding a lot of the terminology that was being used, which I found was incredibly frustrating. So I decided to go ahead and get myself diagnosed with ADHD for a multitude of reasons, but also for that relatability with my children as well through their growing up. And I think one of the reasons it's becoming more of a thing, shall we say, is awareness. So many, I mean, obviously, there is the likes of social media, television programs. There is a lot of conversation and a lot of discussions around how ADHD can present itself. And it's also incredibly inheritable as well. So I think the statistic is actually, I'm not 100% sure on the statistic, but I know it's as inheritable as hair and eye color as well.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, if your young people have it, I think, yeah, highly likely that you as an adult have got it as well. And I think the problem for women is that there is a classic assumption that a woman has mental health issues growing up. I was one of those that was diagnosed with having severe anxiety and depression for a majority of my younger years.
Mm.
But anxiety is also, for want of a better way, a comorbidity of ADHD and the inability to be able to emotionally regulate yourself effectively. And RSD, which is rejection sensitivity dysphoria. I mean, the lists are endless that we can, draw on. But I think women, a lot of behaviors get hidden between giving birth and having families and having children. Our attentions are deflected elsewhere rather than actually looking and addressing our own needs and our own concerns. I, for one, was very inattentive when I was growing up. So my kind of thought processes and my thinkings and my feelings were very insular. It wasn't really until I was older and until my later years that my behaviors became more hyperactive, should we say, where I was a lot more active and being busy and on the go all the time. As you know, lots of ideas, busy brain.
Mm.
But unfortunately, one of the more, I guess, negative elements of ADHD is the need for dopamine seeking. So, with that in mind, we get dopamine in very many different forms. And unfortunately, we're all slightly prone to go for the quick fixes, the quick highs, because they're more beneficial for day-to-day existence than the long-term highs. So those never-ending lists of jobs that you need to do around the house is far less favorable than sitting and having a glass of wine, for example, or eating a bag of sweets, or doom scrolling on social media and watching all the rubbish sitcoms on TV. We're all dispositioned to reach for the highs that are going to serve us a purpose within that moment.
Yeah.
And as a result, it gets so missed, unfortunately.
Mm. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. So effectively, you're saying it's mainly because people aren't really looking into themselves and they haven't created that time or awareness to really think about how they're feeling and what's going on, which is why, and because we obviously are so busy, why people might not even think to get diagnosis for it. But it was interesting you talked about the mental health and the anxiety and depression. And so how would you cope with that when you were younger, and what impact has that had since you've been diagnosed?
So I think for me, it's been something that's slightly mutated through the years as I've got older. So when I was younger, I did a lot of masking and trying to fit into social groups, not really knowing exactly where I settled, I guess. So I went from the sporty groups to the stoners, had a couple of spliffs, absolutely disliked it because I don't like being out of control. So the minute my mind alters slightly, that's it, I'm done. That's not for me. And I don't know whether this is acceptable on here, but dabbled in self harm in various different ways, which again, I think is probably something that quite a lot of people can relate to.
Mm.
And then as I got older, I developed an eating disorder. Well, I still have an eating disorder, but I think that's the same with addiction, really. You are forever having to manage. It's there, but it doesn't define. And I'm okay. That element is well and truly under control because there's a lot of awareness for me there now.
Mm.
But for others, it can present in very many different ways. So that kind of thrill seeking behavior, the risk taking. I'm working with young people at the moment who have got no concept that actually waking up in the morning and taking an ecstasy in bed before they start the day just to feel normal is self medication, and actually replacing that with ADHD meds, for example, they would need to automatically, but it's not a quick high because there's extensive waits. There are long processes to go through to get the medication in the first place. So
Mm.
people are kind of funneled into making unhealthy decisions to navigate and supporting mental health. I guess for me, my crutch is probably smoking. And actually, nicotine, interestingly, has been recognized now as being an addictive behavior, which is most effective for managing ADHD. There's research out there that's just coming out from Dr. Barkley around that. They're trying to form it into tablets at the moment. I don't quite know how successful that
Mm.
will go. But
Interesting.
yes,
Mm.
I don't quite know if I deviated off slightly from the question that you were asking. ADHD brain.
No, no, that's fine. I was just curious as to how it had changed. And so, since you've been diagnosed and been on the medication, would you say that things like anxiety and depression have reduced, or would you say that they're still there, but you're managing them better?
So obviously everybody's journey and everybody's experiences when they start taking medication is going to be completely unique. I feel it's important to note that before I obviously explain my journey, because I don't want people to feel
Mm.
that my journey is going to be exactly the same.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's not. But for me, when I started taking my ADHD medication, the first day that I took the tablet, I cried. My brain suddenly went quiet. It was like a switch had flipped. My anxiety literally disappeared overnight. And it was the most insane experience. It's really, really hard to articulate. It gives me goosebumps just thinking about it
Mm.
because where it was amazing, you have those doubts of like, oh my goodness, I've lived this way, a version of me for so many years that ultimately I was in survival mode since birth. Now
Mm.
I can learn to live authentically.
Mm.
That is an incredibly powerful feeling to have.
Mm.
The day that I got anxiety for the first time after taking medication, it's probably safe to say I properly freaked out. There's a term in REBT therapy, secondary anxiety, being anxious about being anxious. That was me completely. I was like, why am I anxious? Where's it coming from? And I spoke to a friend and they said, look, anxiety is actually a normal emotion. Bearing in
Mm.
mind I'm a therapist, I should
Yeah.
I should have
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
aware of that.
Yeah.
But it was like that was a aha moment for me. Anxiety is there. I think it's going to have everyone's going to have it. It's always going to peep up occasionally, but I have knowledge and awareness now so that I'm able to deal with it if I need to, or
Mm.
accept it and just ride through it on the odd occasion if I recognize that actually it's because something's out of my control. Some of the lovely ADHD triggers that might present itself. Yeah, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, but yeah, for me, I'm living now. I'm not just surviving.
Mm. I love that. When you said that you're able to really finally be your authentic self. So, what does that mean to you?
to have a choice, in a nutshell, knowledge is power for me. I like to be able to have an informed choice.
Mm,
And as a result, it's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be straightforward. I will make mistakes. I will get things wrong. But I now see myself as someone that's learning. So
mm,
every experience that I have now, I never look at anything as a failure if I haven't succeeded, knowing that I can take from that what's worked for me, what hasn't, how that can be moved forward. Even working with my clients, I learned so much from them about myself. Like
mm,
my 10 o'clock doom eating of a bag of sweets, I recognized instantly that I was just dopamine seeking. I didn't need them or want them. And I was getting frustrated because I couldn't put them down. And it was like a light switch. So I was able to put it down because I was aware of why I was doing it. It's
mm,
very bizarre. It's quite hard to articulate, but for me, it's having a choice that's so important.
mm, mm. So if I'd love to go into the dopamine bit in a bit more detail, but before we go there, if someone's listening and thinking, well, how do I know if I'm experiencing some things that actually it might be that I have ADHD? What would your advice be for them?
So
Are there any signs or anything? Yeah.
any signs? So there is a lot of awareness and there is a lot of research now being done finally into the links between ADHD and addiction. So I think if addictive behaviors are things that you struggle with, however it may present, and it doesn't have to be the stereotypical drink and drugs, it could be
Mm,
shopping, gambling, sex, impulsive purchasing, repetitive Amazon deliveries at the front door,
mm,
needing sweets or Red Bulls, all of these things offer those dopamine highs. But also, if you're recognizing within yourself some quite damaging behaviors, and what I mean with that is dopamine doesn't have to come from good things. If you find that you're quite argumentative and you feel the need to consistently stand up and have an argument, all of these little things are triggers of dopamine seeking. I
mm,
mean, literally, that's all we do day to day. How else could they present? Just sheer overwhelm, exhaustion, forgetfulness. For me, it's unorganized, but organized to me piles around the house. If somebody moved those out of the way, and then suddenly my whole day is ruined because I can't find what I was looking for. It's just not where I left it. It's not in its safe place.
mm,
Gosh, I mean, the lists are endless of kind of things to be aware of. But I think also sometimes as well, especially within the realms of, apologies for the dog
that's
barking in the
okay.
background, the doorbell
No
just
problem.
rang.
No problem. Always good to have dogs on the podcast.
Yes, or purchasing lots of animals. I have so many animals in this house, it's absolutely ridiculous. And actually, also another one is not particularly liking people. That's actually a real thing. I like who I like. And
Mm,
other than that, they're acquaintances. And I feel like that's a very neurodiverse statement to make, but
yeah,
you know what I
interesting.
mean if
Yeah.
if you're there. Yeah, I mean, this list could go on and on and on, actually, to be fair.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating because, some of the things you mentioned, I'd also say if you're not drinking, you might find that some of these things go away as well. Not
Mm-hmm,
necessarily because you're ADHD, but because it's just something that's there. So, for example, if you're drinking, alcohol actually exacerbates things like stress, depression, anxiety.
mm-hmm,
And so when you stop drinking, potentially that will go. And I know quite a few people who've come off antidepressants, etc., once they've, it's taken 6 months, a year, whatever, but it has happened that they're able to come off that medication. So it's interesting to me, when do you rush to go and get diagnosed versus when do you do other things potentially to see whether it's behavior versus something else. And you've talked a lot about dopamine and the impact of dopamine. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that specifically, because I think a lot of it becomes a habit, as we talked about before this conversation, and it becomes a habit that we may not necessarily be aware that we can change. You talked about eating sweets at whatever time in the morning, and that's what your go to. How do people best process, because I talk a lot about processing and managing emotions as part of my Thrive AF methods, which is in, the freedom part, to really help people to start living and being authentic and everything else, and actually being willing to sit in those emotions and not just find something to cover over them or hide them. So how would you maybe best describe or talk about the impact of us all wanting those dopamine highs and what you can potentially do instead, especially if you have ADHD, or if you're, potentially have ADHD?
So, it's very interesting what you were saying there about that kind of the coming off of the antidepressants and stuff once people make that decision to stop drinking. And
Mm.
if we sidestep and relate that to ADHD, obviously the medication that I'm on, for example, that is a stimulant. So it produces dopamine automatically in my brain. When you have ADHD, you genuinely just don't have very much dopamine.
Mm.
There is just,
Interesting.
it's as simple as that. You're missing the
Yeah.
dopamine and the serotonin in your brain.
Yeah.
So if your form of medication, shall we say, has been alcohol, as soon as you stop drinking, your brain hasn't got anything else to release dopamine,
Mm.
hence the extreme depressions and not necessarily wanting to maintain sobriety, because there's like a void. Your brain has got to rewire itself in a way to find other sources of dopamine in a kind of more healthier way, should we say.
Mm.
But again, where the correlation with the ADHD might come into that is actually we are designed to look for those quick fixes. So we're kind of having to really fight against the grain to kind of find and utilize other things around us to get dopamine instead of to replace
Mm.
what we were automatically ingesting anyway. But interestingly, dopamine can be found anywhere, doing anything. It's anything which is remotely positive, whether it's going for a walk, getting outside in nature. All of these things are natural stimulants which can help to slowly but surely replace the dopamine which is lacking.
Mm.
I've forgotten what your question is. Sorry that you you asked.
I was just asking about your thoughts on dopamine, really, and how
Mm,
you get that naturally, and how you sort of recognize that maybe a habit isn't something that is necessarily good for you, but it's something that you are drawn to because you need that dopamine hit. And so I think you answered it by talking about how you can get it naturally.
mm.
But I think habits are just so easy to form, be them negative and or positive habits. And and you talked a lot about awareness, but even though people are aware, they don't necessarily know how to change those habits, or they don't have the conviction maybe to actually do something about it. So I wonder, if you are ADHD and you become aware of that, does it make it easier to stop those habits, or do you still find you're going towards those habits because of the dopamine effect?
It's that accountability element, isn't it? I think there is a lot of, especially in the early days, a lot of conscious awareness that would need to be brought to the situation.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, somebody with ADHD needs to get dopamine from somewhere.
Mm.
And if that the normal go-to is no longer there, without awareness, there is that possibility of, I guess, cross addiction might be,
Yeah.
that would be a good way of explaining it. I'm working with a client at the moment that just suddenly had that awareness that actually they started stealing, and they don't need to steal, that they've got money. It's not, for living, that's not the thing. It's that thrill of having got away with something that was, it's an extreme shot of dopamine, I guess, or looking for the thrill seeking, like cliff diving, for example, or driving a motorbike at 150 miles an hour down the motorway. Without that kind of consistent accountability, it's so easy to cross into other areas without really understanding why that is the activity of choice, for example, that you might have decided to do instead of to replace.
Mm.
Um, I mean, for me personally, as I've mentioned to you already, I am a drinker, but I hate getting drunk. It's just something that I think probably I can count on one hand in my life how many times I've actually got drunk. I hate being out of control.
Mm.
But for me, a reward, shall we say, in an evening is to sit and have a gin and tonic.
Mm.
And I think as part of my journey with the client base that I work with the awareness that I'm developing, I realized how dependent on that habit I had become of my
Mm.
constitutional gin and tonic at 9 o'clock once everyone's gone to bed and I'm sat in silence.
Mm.
And even though I wouldn't necessarily deem that as an addiction, I recognize it's not a healthy habit to have, because actually, if I go out for an evening, for example, I think to myself, oh, damn, I didn't have my gin and tonic. My norms are no longer there.
Mm.
So as a result of that, I've replaced it in an evening with another treat drink, which I won't allow myself to have in the day. So it's still a reward, but in a way, I've kind of just tricked my brain into recognizing it as being the treat instead of
Mm.
my original go-to, and worked for me. But again, it's that conscious, because I've made that concerted effort. The first few weeks I didn't particularly enjoy it. It was because I felt like I wasn't fully decompressing in an evening, because I wasn't able to do my normal routine, because ADHD is very structured, it's very
Yeah.
routine based. Quite quickly it became part of my new routine. Gosh, I sound
Mm.
like such a so odd. But I
Mm.
also do other things. I've decided I quite like colouring in. I quite often get laughed at by my husband for doing that, sitting there in the evening. But I need to do something. I can't just sit and just watch TV. So yeah, there's a few things that I've done personally to try and break habits, because I'm very prone to develop habits and dependencies on things, not necessarily so much what you would deem unhealthy highs, but it's the thought processes and the thinking that goes into it, which I am now aware of. So I'm now able to control it more effectively.
Yeah, maybe go into that a little bit more when you talk about the thought process and the thinking. So does that come before the action, or what do you mean by that?
I think it's just what in terms of replacement or terms of
You just talked about thought processes specifically in the thinking. I
mm,
was just wondering what you were referring to.
so I think probably anybody that's listening to this can think to themselves that they have a treat, something that they allow themselves to do as a reward for surviving the day at work, or
Mm.
surviving the week at work, or getting through tough meetings. And I feel that so many of us automatically go for the, oh, let's have something alcoholic. It's
Mm.
one of the easiest substances to get hold of.
Mm.
So in terms of, I guess, breaking those habits, it is very conscious to begin with. At the very early stages of me having to reintroduce my treat drink, which is non-alcoholic gin, but it just doesn't taste quite the same. But I wouldn't necessarily walk around in the day drinking non-alcohol. It's just
Mm.
something that I wouldn't have in the day. So it's a
Mm.
reward, because having rewards gives us an even higher hit of
Mm.
dopamine. So it becomes less of a conscious habit the more you kind of do it.
Mm.
I don't know. I mean, there was sayings that it takes 2 weeks or 3 weeks to change thought processes. I think that's all a load of bollocks. I think everyone's so different. Some people adapt really, really quickly, and for others, that might not cut it, and they'll need to look for other things that they could potentially do. I mean, exercise classes, they're awesome. We've had plenty of conversations before about different
Yeah.
exercises and
Yeah.
challenges and things to work towards. So, yeah, you have to just give yourself that bit of a personal talking to.
Yeah, it's interesting. So everything you're talking about is what I coach on, and
Amazing.
alcohol-free drinks is a real way of keeping the ritual but changing the ingredient. So you are
Love it.
absolutely tricking the mind, but it's so helpful because when that time comes and you get those cravings, and cravings from an alcohol perspective don't actually last for more than a few days. Physical cravings, it's they become thoughts, and so the cravings are just the thoughts. And so lots of people refer to it as like the wine witch, or something that comes into their head at wine o'clock, that time of day when you know that it's time to have that drink. And
10 o'clock.
so
Yeah.
it's having as you say, that thought process. And so we talk a lot about halt, where you pause and before grabbing that drink, you say, am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, or maybe fearful? which would be an extra one. But then, if that's the case, what is it that I actually want? Because ultimately, it's all about what are the feelings I'm trying to create, what are
Mm.
the feelings I'm trying to escape from. It's not actually about the alcohol. And so it's being able to pause and question yourself and think about whether or not that's helpful. And then things like I also teach people EFT, which is emotional freedom technique, tapping. How do you use that to actually reduce those cravings or manage those cravings better, effectively stop them? And EFT can be applied to anxiety, to stress, to anything really. You can tap your way and get rid of all the negative energy and tap in the positive thoughts. And so, and then you talked about coloring as well, which is fantastic, because another thing I talk about is how do you discover what those new passions and hobbies are? Because a lot of people stop drinking and suddenly find all this time and space on their hands, and like, what am I going to do with it? So by discovering those new passions, exercise, colouring, painting, photography, whatever it is, and doing that instead and starting to build up those healthy habits to get those dopamine and serotonin hits,
Mm.
it's really important, because you have taken quite a big chunk away from you in terms of what you're used to, the habits you've already formed, and your automatic go-tos. So I think everything you said is so helpful for people that potentially have ADHD, potentially thinking they might go and get a diagnosis, but also people that just stop drinking or are ready to stop drinking, because I think it all sort of interlinks, and ultimately everything we do is habit based. We run on 95% of what we do every day is automatic, because it's based on our subconscious, and so it's what we've programmed into our minds. So when you talked about having those thoughts and really checking yourself and the accountability, it's absolutely the case, because what you want to do is start switching that automatic programming and being aware of it, so that you can then start to build those habits and those healthy things that are actually going to work. And similarly, you mentioned cross addiction, and I think cross addiction is something a lot of people experience. Sugar is one of the key things. So when people stop
Mm.
drinking, they suddenly find they've got this sweet tooth, they've never had it before, because alcohol has a lot of sugar that we don't actually appreciate in it. And it also is something that the body needs, but again, it's in certain doses. So then how do you find alternatives like stevia or coconut sugar, and how do you maybe go to dark chocolate instead of milk chocolate, and have dates and things like that, different healthier snacks, in order to try and alleviate those sugar cravings. But then other people do exactly what you say, they go on Amazon and they're shopping. Again, it's our monkey mind, and it's our distraction, and not being able to sit still and just be. And personally for me, I found that meditating, yoga, doing that on a daily basis really helps me to calm the mind, and not then feel I need to go to things outside of myself. It's all in me, and I'm able to do things from me, as opposed to thinking that's going to make me happy or that's going to give me that high, because it ultimately is a distraction, and it's not the case. But getting to that point takes years, and I'm nowhere near perfect or there. But I think it's just having those habits that you can build in, regardless of who you are and what you are. I think it's really helpful for anyone who's listening to have heard what you said. So thank you for sharing that.
Just wanted to add on very, very quickly, actually, what
Yeah,
you
of
were saying,
course.
in terms of the meditation. For me personally, meditating is just something I can't do. So
Mm,
I have to try and find my, I guess, mindfulness moments doing alternative activities. So a prime example would be if I go for a walk, I listen to audiobooks so that my thinking
mm,
is focused solely on the words that somebody else is talking about, or podcasts, or
mm,
some of these other things, because that
mm,
probably, if you are really finding the thought of meditation as being a hurdle for you, that
mm,
might also be another indication that there may be some other things that are potentially going on.
mm,
And also that need for control, so that need to be practical and having a set process and a set routine working forward in terms of your recovery process, that might also be a slight flag to think, why do I need to have so much control?
Mm.
It's not wrong to have that control, but it's obviously making sure you're doing it safely and constructively,
Mm.
rather than using things to deflect into and hide other emotions or feelings or thinkings. So those are all things that potentially might present post
Mm.
sobriety, for example, that you might really struggle with.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's helpful. When I talk about meditation, I'm not sitting in silence. So I do guided
Yeah,
meditation. So I have someone in my ear speaking to
I
me.
did.
So I think there are different types of meditation as well. But lots of people just think we're all sitting in silence and we're not
Mm.
thinking. And that's not what meditation is for me personally. But there are lots of different ways. So I quite like that you talked about the audiobooks. I think that's helpful. And then actually, I talk a lot about routines and having those morning and evening routines. Again, it just is helpful to develop those in order to have that structure for so many different reasons. So it feels like there's such a link between correlation between not drinking and being diagnosed ADHD, because I think some of the habits and the things that you develop afterwards are helpful in both cases. So this is
I think it would be quite useful just to mention that sometimes a trauma response is can come through as perceived ADHD as well.
mm,
So I feel that that is something that people should be mindful of, because obviously there's huge amounts of reasons why people choose alcohol, for example, as a form of escapism. But a lot of the ADHD, there are very close correlations between trauma and ADHD responses. My feeling is that if you are looking and you are striving and thinking that there's ADHD, or you recognize it within yourself or within your family members, it would always be a really good idea to explore CBT or coaching
mm,
alongside, or some
yeah.
form of counseling and therapy, because obviously any form of addictive behavior is an escapism and it's also a blocker. So there might be a lot of suppressed things that need to be addressed, as well as before you get a
Mm.
definitive diagnosis for ADHD. I think it's just something to be mindful of.
Yeah, and that's really helpful. I was talking to someone the other day who's worked a lot with Gabor Mate. I don't know if you come across Gabor, but he does a lot of work in the trauma space and how the body,
Got a book.
yeah, how it's all in our body and the impact of trauma. And this isn't big T traumas; these are little T traumas. So everyone's experienced little T traumas. And again, I think this also comes up when you've stopped drinking for a couple of months, 2 to 3 months. You start getting those emotions and thinking about the years of drinking and what you did over that time and potential trauma that you might have experienced. And so I think that's really helpful. But Gabor Mate is a really good person to read his books, or just go on YouTube and watch some of his work, because trauma yeah, is all humans have experienced it, and
Mm.
the impact can be a huge, wide range. And so I didn't realize there was potential for people to think ADHD when actually it's just trauma. That's quite interesting. So yeah, good to know.
That's a whole
Um,
different kettle of fish, not for today.
yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot
yeah,
of research
absolutely.
there.
Absolutely. So I'd love people to sort of know what you do and how you help people. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. As I mentioned, I'm a qualified counsellor. So, first and foremost, that's what the field that I was trained in. Unintentionally, and somehow, I would say all of my clients to date have been pre or post diagnosis with ADHD. And it's an area that I absolutely adore working in. I'm probably the most uncounselor counsellor out there. Because I want people to recognize that I'm there as an equal. I'm not there in the sense of authority. I adapt every session, so it's completely unique to the clients that I work with. I work with 14 plus. I do a lot of psychoeducation around what makes a person who they are, so they can get a real understanding within the realms of ADHD, exactly putting the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. Who are they? Who's the real them within that? I work with obviously other areas of presenting concerns that any other counsellor would work with as well. And I also do walk and talk therapy, farm therapy, utilizing animals. I don't know about other people's experiences within counselling, but there is nothing worse than being stuck in four walls, making forced eye contact with somebody who wants you to talk at them for an hour. yeah, that doesn't work for me. And I know for the majority of the clients that I have, it doesn't work for them either. So I'm adaptable online, face to face. And if I can't help or support somebody, I will go to the nth degree to find somebody that can.
Hmm.
So even if I don't advertise specific services, ask, because I will do what I can to try and point people in the right direction. So yeah, jack of all trades. I'm master of ADHD.
I love it. I love it. It's fascinating. Okay, so how can people get in touch with you?
So I know that you're going to tag my website, I think, aren't you, with the podcast? But typically, I've picked a really awkward website name to tell people. It's empowered. Is it hyphen the little line?
Yeah,
This is
hyphen.
the
Yeah.
dyslexia in me. Yeah, empowered hyphen coaching dot today is my website, and all of my personal contact details, email and mobile number are all on there. So it's probably just easier to not confuse matters and just give people my website.
Fantastic. We will give them the website and then they can obviously get in touch with you and find out more and potentially just have a chat and see
Mm,
where it goes from there. And so if anyone is has recently been diagnosed or is thinking maybe they do have some of the signs of it or their children, it sounds like it was because of your children's diagnosis that you then went on to
yeah.
do it. So again, that's another way of potentially looking into it then.
Exactly. You don't necessarily have to come to me because of drinking. You know, it could be literally anything, personal experiences. How do you live alongside somebody, for example, with ADHD,
Yeah.
anything like that, then,
Oh, brilliant.
please. But actually, I do just very quickly want to tag on, if your listeners or any of your clients that haven't used your human design yet, they need to. I had a session with Jupe and she did my human design for me, and you very much validated so much of my being that, yes, it's just been a phenomenal experience. So I highly, highly recommend that if they haven't,
Oh,
they do.
thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. That wasn't planned at all. So,
No, no, no.
so
I just wanted to
I'm
get it in there.
touched. Thank you. Okay, so is there anything else that you want to share with the listener? Anything that we might have missed?
Goodness. No, I don't think there's necessarily anything. I think really the biggest take home that I want people to have from any of this, whether it's ADHD, whether it's addiction, mental health concerns, anything, it's so important for people to realize that they're not on their own. So many of us as therapists have lived experiences as well. And we are here and we are doing what we're doing because we are using our experiences to help and support others who are having similar experiences. And we learn just as much from you as what you may hopefully learn from us. So if you haven't and you're scared, just try, pick up the phone, just ring. The worst case, if you've had a bad experience, actually, I think it's normally because you just haven't found the right person. Because the right person, you will just feel, for want of a better way, do I say normal? You'll feel an equal, because we're not here to preach. We're just here to be and to sit with you and to offer a safe space. So please just don't give up hope. There is support out there and we're all with you.
Yeah, I love that. That's brilliant, and it's so true. And yeah, thank you for saying that. And so I always end the call or the conversation with what does thriving alcohol free mean to you? And I know you've actually switched to alcohol free drinks. I know you do drink as well, but I'll ask you, what does thriving alcohol free mean to you?
And I know that I gave you a really good answer earlier, and I can't remember what I said to you. So my brain has gone a bit blank. But I think,
Choice.
yeah, choice. It's having a choice and having the strength and the self-belief in myself to know that I can make a decision for myself which feels authentic. And ultimately, if it doesn't work, I live with the consequences, and that's cool. But the bottom line of it is, yeah, choice, 100%.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. Okay, that's fab. Anything else?
Yeah, one thing I did really want to mention actually is styles of learning and absorbing information. There is a method called VAC, which is vision, auditory, and kinesthetic. So, a really big thing for me as part of my training is I established that I was a kinesthetic learner. So, what that meant is that I learnt by doing rather than sitting and listening and absorbing information. As a result of that, that's really helped me in terms of building confidence in my ways of working and also in my ways of absorbing information, not just in training, but just in life in general. So you can go online and you can find online adult VAK, so it's capital letters,
Mm,
assessments that you can do, which will give you an indication on your best way of absorbing information. So, in terms
mm,
of recovery or finding information or being guided towards activities that might be of interest,
mm,
learning how you work and how you absorb that information will significantly help because it's less of a
mm.
fight, it's more of a natural process.
Yeah, and that's so true and so useful as well for people because you're right. People are one of those things, visual, audio, kinesthetic, and knowing that probably brought you a lot of relief, I would imagine, wouldn't it? Did it
Mm,
when you found that out? Because for years you would have been thinking, I need to learn in this way, and that's what society tells us. And again, it probably goes back to the human design piece that we're all
mm,
designed quite differently, but society sort of built on this is how people learn, this is how people learn at school, this is how people learn further on, etc. Yeah, so I think that's useful. What so with the kinesthetic, that basically means it's as you're doing. Do you also learn on, and you were talking about walking and talking with your clients? Do you think
mm.
that's something to do with it as well, or?
Gosh, I do you know I've never particularly kind of explored that link. It
Mm,
sounds rather selfish. I've done the walk and talk therapy because I don't like being sat down for long periods of time. That's, if I'm brutally honest, that's the main reason why I looked into doing it initially. But
yeah.
actually, I do find that a lot of people love that because you're getting exercise, you're getting healthy dopamine, you've got company, you're able to have communications and build confidences in a
Mm,
completely unique environment. And young people, getting them to get objects and throw them and screaming or playing poo
mm,
sticks, all of these things,
mm,
there are just great ways of helping connect us and build that kind of therapeutic bond and just
mm,
benefits of vitamin D. And, the list is endless really about being outside. But no, in terms of the kinesthetic, for me, I spent 2 years of training feeling, for want of a better way of explaining it, I felt really thick. I really struggled to
mm,
understand what I was being taught. Everyone around me seemed to be just getting it. I, on more than one occasion, nearly stepped away and stopped doing the training. What kept me there was the fact that I was so desperate. My journey, my experiences, they had to mean something. I couldn't
mm,
have had lived experiences that I did and it'd be wasted.
mm,
So actually, once I got diagnosed, once I established my learning style, I went to my tutor and I was able to advocate for myself effectively. And as a result, I was able to utilize referencing, for example, from websites rather than theological books. But more to the point was that actually I knew that once I started working with clients, I was going to be able to put into action things that I'd been told. That is when I was going to absorb exactly how it worked because it kind of played out in front of me, which is why I get my highs from my clients. I come out of sessions and I'm like buzzing. Oh
yeah,
my God, it suddenly makes sense. It's just amazing. I love it. But also, yeah, my healthy highs comes from exercise because I'm doing, it's good. I feel it. I love it.
fantastic, fantastic. Well, Emma, thank you. It's been delightful chatting to you, and I know it's going to be helpful for so many people just hearing the conversation. So many people are just asking me about the links between ADHD and alcohol and whether or not that's the reason that they're struggling to stop and they're using it as a crutch and things like that. And so the fact that you talked about dopamine and that actually being missing as part of people that have got been diagnosed with ADHD. That's a really interesting thing, and trying to work out what the healthy habits are, etc. I think that's going to be really useful for so many people. So thank you for coming along. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed being here and having a good old natter about it.
Great. Well, get in touch with Emma if you have any questions, and I'll leave all her details on the show notes. Okay, well, lovely to speak, and I'll see you soon. Take
Thank
care.
you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Emma. I hope you enjoyed that conversation and you've learnt a bit more about ADHD. And if you wonder whether you or anyone in your family has ADHD, then please go and get a diagnosis for that. and reach out to Emma if you have any questions. I'll put all her details in the show notes below. As I said, if it's helpful and you would like to have a ditch drinking discovery call with me, then head to the show notes. I have a few slots in the coming weeks, so you can book a 30-minute complimentary call with me to discuss where you are on your alcohol journey or your alcohol-free journey. And if you would like to get chapter 1 of A Cocktail of Clarity, again, I will put the link in the show notes for that. As always, I'd love to hear how you're finding the podcast, if there's anything specific you'd like to hear. And if you have any questions that I could potentially help you with, then just let me know. Feel free to DM me on @thrivealcoholfree or head to my website, thrivealcoholfree.com. And I am always here to chat, and I'm here to support and help you any way I can. So on that note, have the most wonderful week, and I will see you on the next one. Take care. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe so you get alerted every time I drop a new episode. I'd love it if you could rate, review, and share this episode. Feel free to tag me on Instagram @Thrive Alcohol Free and follow me for daily tips. If you would like to work with me, I offer one-to-one coaching sessions and have my group coaching program. If you're not yet ready for coaching, I also have a self-paced online course, which is a companion to my book, A Cocktail of Clarity. All the links are in the show notes. I will see you in the next episode. Have a wonderful week. Take care.